go, welcome back to VLR with Justin and Ulam. So, as mentioned last time, we're going to go ahead and jump to this another time, which I'm presuming is just some story closing up to give us some closure with some of these characters, since, as per my conclusion from the last game, I think the essential... Oh, interesting, different voice, so this is... Ah, that explains why it's also listed over here. So, closing the loop, it does appear, I've also looked somewhat into what the third game is kind of like and about and whatnot, and not in depth enough to really understand anything about it, so I've honestly been pretty confused about how that's how and why it follows up. But now, what little I know about the third game, and now with this ending to the second, I'm pretty sure that in essence this is sort of a Pirates of the Caribbean situation where the first game is pretty standalone, but then the second and third are clearly a part A and part B, and so that's why this one's story kind of feels like it's really gone through all of this only to get us, like, you know, halfway there, because the other half is that other game. But I believe this is now this is that furthest along path Zero Senior coming back after we booted him out of that past.
I see you've finally woken up, Kyle.
Oh, or maybe not. Maybe, I guess this is Kyle having woken up without memories. In which case, that Zero Senior should still also be here, too.
Kyle?
Yes, of course. You've only just woken up in this timeline. It's only natural for some of your memories to be missing.
I lurched upright, jumped off the bed, and ran around to the other side of the partition. The mirror over the sink was covered with a film of dirt. I wiped it off with my sleeve, and my reflection stared back at me. There was no mistake. The reflection belonged to...
Kyle Climb. So, I'm Dr. Climb? Zero Senior's clone?
What? How do you know that? Shouldn't you still be suffering from amnesia?
Yeah, I wonder. An excellent question, one I didn't quite know the answer to myself. I knew who Kyle Clem was. In another history, he'd been called K and worn a suit of armor. He hadn't just worn the armor in that history, though. Apparently, he'd worn it all his life. Kyle had been born and raised in this lunar installation, which seemed to be called Rhizome 9. Yeah, so if I'm reading this correctly, I think that this is probably why he was being referred to as a backup. This may not be Kyle's consciousness at all. This may indeed be Zero Senior's consciousness, failing to return to his own body at point B, and instead, for some reason, returning to Kyle, presumably because he was unconscious. Which would mean that Kyle's adult consciousness has been sent from point B to... who knows? Again, maybe that's another mystery that'll be... Maybe I'm reading too much into it, or maybe that's a mystery that'll be revealed in the third game. Rather late in his life, Akane had appeared as a mother figure, and he had consequently grown very attached to her, which is... Yeah, now that little bit has become kind of confusing, since Akane was saying at point C that she was going to be going with how her name suddenly escaped me, with Sigma to the moon, but perhaps she leaves before K is created and then comes back. I knew everything about him, but even though I knew it, I didn't feel it. You know, that's what I'm thinking, this is what's going on. Was I really Kyle Clem? Every time I looked into the mirror, I saw his face. A spitting image of Sigma Clem in his younger days. I looked down. There was Dio, still handcuffed. I turned back around to Luna.
What day is today?
January 27th, 2074.
And today is the last day of the AB project. Akane has explained everything in the garden. And she drew a knife and attacked Phi. How long have I been asleep?
About 5 hours in real time. For them, it would have seemed like a little more than 2 hours.
So they still haven't been treated for their Radical 6?
No, they've all been given the antiviral. It just takes a while to have an effect.
I see. So the consciousness of the younger Sigma has gone back into the past. It should have happened right after Akane attacked Phi, right?
Yes,
Why am I here?
the doctor carried you back here. You were in the pod in the garden.
So the person you call the doctor is Sigma Klein, as inhabited by his age-appropriate consciousness.
Perhaps.
Yes, but how do you know that?
Dio seems to have remained unconscious.
Yes, I've been administering Soparil whenever he gets restless.
Curious
What about the
if
others?
keeping him alive.
They've all gone off to different areas. Tenmyoji and Quark, for instance.
Oh, right. Mr. Klein.
So the sleepyhead's finally up, huh?
What are you two doing here?
You don't know where we are?
This is the upper floor of the pressure exchange chamber, the real one.
Mm-hmm.
We were just about to get dressed and head out.
You plan to return then? To Earth, I mean.
Yeah.
Sigma told us where we could find the shuttle that brought us here. Well, guess he's not really the Sigma I knew anymore. He's Dr. Klein now, or Zero Senior, depending on how you look at it.
Why?
So yeah, if indeed that's happened, then a possible alternative would be that perhaps part of why Kay was both being knocked out and whatever not is that he's also... I don't know, this is all very confusing.
What do you mean, why?
I'm just curious why you would choose to return to a devastated planet when you could stay here.
How's staying here gonna help? You aren't gonna say something idiotic about how we should wait here until Sigma changes the past, are you? You can't wait for something that's already happened. Grammar doesn't work that way. Hell, nature doesn't work that way. You following me? We've already lived through history. Sigma failed to keep the virus from getting out. About 45 years ago, Radical 6 created a pandemic, and the antimatter reactors blew up. That all happened. Whatever Sigma does in the past, history's not gonna change. In fact, it's because of what he did, or didn't do in the past, that we've got this past and present. Let me give you an example. Imagine a group of 100 motorcycles driving down an endless freeway. Eventually, they hit a junction. The road splits in two. One freeway continues off northwest, and the other stretches out to the northeast. So one guy, we'll call him S, pipes up. "Let's go northwest," he says. So they take the northwestern road. But about a mile past the intersection, something horrible happens. A semi driving the other way veers into their lane and plows through the bikers. 90 of them die. The surviving 10 are wounded, but survive. They don't stop, though. They keep riding down that highway, and eventually, they'd gone 10,000 miles. Then suddenly, something happens that they couldn't have predicted. S, who had survived, suddenly has his consciousness thrown back in time. He ends up back in his own body just before they reach the junction. He remembers everything. So what does S do? What anybody would do. Let's go northeast. That means all 100 of the bikers survive to reach their destination, happy and healthy. And they all live happily ever after. That's what you're thinking, right? It's a great outcome for the 100 bikers that went northeast. But what about the 10 that went northwest and survived the accident?
Huh? Wouldn't it be 9 people? I mean, S's mind went back in time, right?
Right. Okay. 9 people then. What happens to the reality they were living? Does it just disappear when S changes the past?
Not unless you want to get into
It's not as if it was only bad things that happened during that 10,000-mile trip. Maybe one of them fell in love with a woman working at a gas station they stopped at and had a child. Maybe one of them picked up a homeless kid who joined them on their adventure. That 10,000-mile journey would be full of stories, friendships, farewells, romances. The loss of those 90 lives is horrible and unfortunate. But what would rewriting their history mean? The 9 who survived lived full lives. How can it be right to just erase all that? The survivors overcame their own misery and loss and made the best they could of the hand they'd been dealt. Isn't that worth something? Isn't that the best thing that humans can aspire to? Is there really any point to a world where everything is happy? Are people who struggle for a better life just idiots? Being human is about fighting, even when it seems hopeless, and finding happiness, even in a world that hates it.
Easy enough to say as a member of the 10 that didn't get plowed by, or die to the semi.
Are you saying that's worthless? If you're saying rewriting the past will erase all these other timelines, then whatever God wrote those rules can Look, I'm just not going to accept that, all right? You get it?
If Sigma changes the past, then you and Quark will never meet.
That's not
Is
strictly
he
or
right?
necessarily true.
No, it's not gonna happen. We're here right now. This is reality. Even if Sigma does change the past, we're not just gonna disappear or something.
Which brings up an issue with the whole many worlds variety of time traveling that, in essence, you're not really changing the past. You're doing something in a timeline where that's always how it happened. You're just moving where your consciousness was. So you're saying bye to the bad timeline and hi to the good one. Whoops.
Then that means we get to stay together?
And again, that, strictly speaking, it
Good.
doesn't mean necessarily that you don't meet Quark in a timeline where you
Thanks,
both
kid.
survived.
I understand how you feel. Why you want to return to Earth is clear. You have lives there, I imagine. There are likely people waiting for you.
Right.
Uh-huh.
Have you already said goodbye to the others?
Vi, Luna, Alice, and Clover all saw us off. We told them we'd see them again someday, and then came here.
They were the only people you want to say goodbye to?
Well, no point saying anything to Dio.
I think there's a couple choice words,
Besides, he's asleep. You were asleep too.
Sorry, but we didn't really know much about you.
but well,
have
you
a
still
point.
don't.
Akane was in the armor in this timeline, after all. What about Sigma?
Well, he's not really Mr. Sigma anymore.
Of course, he is Dr. Klein now that his consciousness has returned.
Yeah, but more importantly, he's the guy who brought us all here. Not a lot of warm feelings there, you know?
And Akane?
Never mind her. She's just like him. Not the Akane I knew.
I don't know how to tell you this, Tenmyoji. She was always a Sakane.
She must have seen some pretty awful things over the years.
Are you totally forgetting how she orchestrated the first, or the second Nonary game?
Hell, she might not even be human anymore. But the Akane Kurashiki I know isn't here. She's not
Fair.
anywhere.
But she wasn't there 45 years ago either.
In the end, Clover and I were just pawns. Pawns to be used and then gotten rid of. Still, it's not like we're completely resentful. We had to be here to help change the past. That part's easy to understand.
I'm assuming
but
that works
Kinda
or
sucks,
even
though.
affects you at all.
I mean, Sigma and Phi have it easy. They get to go back to December 25th in 2028.
Again, no, they don't. Sigma initially has to come back and then eventually grow old to become old Dr. Klim before he can go back and try to change things again. And we're not entirely sure
They'll
where
stop the
Phi
Radical
got thrown
Six
back.
and save the world,
Maybe.
and then they'll have a nice, normal future to look forward to. In other words, they get to go back to Point E and just enjoy history like it was supposed to happen.
But we don't. We're stuck with Point C as our starting point.
You told us about Tenmyoji's story, right? The one with the motorcycles? It would be like if Alice and I were kidnapped right before the intersection. Then whoever grabbed us takes us to wherever the bikers are going, 10,000 miles to the northwest.
Don't get us wrong. We know why we had to be here. Without us, S's consciousness wouldn't have been able to go back to right before the intersection.
Also, zero guarantee that if you hadn't been grabbed, you wouldn't have just died years ago to the Radical
If
Six
that
or
couldn't
any
happen,
of the other
then
number
the
of
fate
things.
of those 90 dead bikers would be sealed.
And you might be among them.
But
It's still not the best situation for those of us left in the Northwest. We're stuck in the reality where the 90 bikers died.
And you weren't one of them.
are we just supposed to go live on Earth? It's a wasteland now. And what about our friends and families? We left a whole world behind 45 years ago.
And like I said, who knows what that's done to your life expectancy.
Even if it is for the greater good,
It just doesn't seem fair, does it?
yeah, it's a little bit much.
So we went and talked to the old lady.
She told us that there is one way.
One way we could get back to the past.
Let's say you do go back to the past. Wouldn't that cause your minds to get thrown back here? That seemed to be how Sigma and Phi's jumps worked, at least.
Yes, you're
But this is different.
Different.
From what she said, it sounds like there's a way we can send our bodies back in time too.
That's ridiculous. It would create a paradox. How could you have two Clovers and two Alices at the same time?
But that wouldn't happen.
Akane says there's a way around that.
How on earth does she plan to do that?
Schrodinger's
Cat.
Well, again, fascinating.
Oh,
I
hey,
presume
Kyle.
perhaps that's going to be part of... All right, you should have jumped back too,
Figured
shouldn't you?
you'd come here eventually.
Where's Dr. Klein? Luna said you were with him.
He said he was tired, so he's off resting right now. There's a bedroom at the end of the hallway. He's in there if you're curious. Oh, right. He told me to turn on this hologram projector thing when you showed up. Want me to start it?
Sure.
Okay.
Glad to see you. There isn't anything in particular that I have to tell you. However, I imagine there are a great number of things weighing on your mind. I'd love to answer all your questions, but unfortunately, my circumstances make that an impossibility. I hope you can forgive me. Everything I know, Phi should also know. I have instructed her to answer any questions anyone might have. Anyone other than Kyle, that is.
I beg your pardon. All that message
What does
just
he
for
mean,
that?
other than Kyle?
Who knows? Is there anything you want to ask?
Right, well, I guess I may as well cut to the chase. Just who are you, Phi?
I'm not Superman, that's for sure. And I'm not Batman or Spider-Man.
Oh
or
my
I'm not a
goodness, not
Brahmin
this
or
again,
Kamen or
please.
Ramen. I'm not a caveman.
Please don't dodge the question. About 5 hours ago, Akane attacked you with a knife. That triggered something which sent your mind back to the past, correct? Specifically, you were sent to Point D, April 13th,
Which would
2029.
put her into the sleeping body as well for that long.
On that date, your body was already in Akane's custody. Although by then you were in cold sleep. You wouldn't have regained consciousness, but your mind was now inhabiting that body. That pod was your home for 45 years. You slept there, frozen, until the time was right. Then on January 25th, 2074, you were finally thawed out, even though you didn't wake up. Still unconscious, that was when your consciousness changed bodies again. A version of you from December 25th, 2028 arrived, pushing you out and sending you back to December 25th, 2028. This is when you finally woke up. In 2028, you found and joined forces with Sigma, whose older mind was inhabiting his younger body. Together, you attempted to infiltrate the Mars mission test facility. Unfortunately, your plan failed. The Radical Six did escape on New Year's Eve. That failure determined the path you followed. Instead of going along the line that branches out to the right from Point E, you headed straight to Point D.
Which means that, like old Sigma, she's the
Point
one
D
who
being
has
April
arrived here
13th
now
of the
as well.
following year. That was the day that you made your way to Akane's hideout and asked to be put into one of the treatment pods. Another consciousness enters your body around that time from the future. It is, of course, the version of you that left your body when Akane attacked you in the garden. This caused the two versions of you to swap places, and you moved 45 years into the future, where you woke up on the garden floor. That put you on the line that comes here.
So, in other words, Phi, you now know
So
a lot
if we
more.
discount the time you spent in cold sleep, for you, only 3.5 months have passed since that happened. That being when you were sent back into the past from the garden. Have I missed anything?
No, everything you talked about you got right.
Well, what do you mean by that?
I'm kind of an unknown variable in this equation. You could think of me as a kind of X factor. It's taken me the last 3.5 months to understand it.
I haven't understood anything in the last 3.5 seconds. Could you please explain?
It's kind of like the relationship between classical mechanics and modern physics. Strictly speaking, you can't combine velocities with v1 plus v2. v1 plus v2 divided by 1 plus v1 times v2 over c squared is the actual equation. Of course, the sort of velocities we encounter in day-to-day life don't come close to being c squared, which is the speed of light squared. That means that 1 plus v1 times v2 divided by c squared is usually going to evaluate to something pretty close to 1. Since that would mean dividing by 1, it's usually okay to just skip that step and use v1 plus v2. You see what I'm saying? In most situations it works, even if it isn't technically correct. So you knew enough to get the stuff you were talking about right. As long as you stick to that, you won't run into any problems.
I don't quite understand. In fact, I feel like you're dodging my questions.
So was that what you wanted to ask about?
No. What I really want to know is what happened between Christmas and New Year's Eve in 2028. You and Sigma infiltrated the Mars mission test site, didn't you?
Yes.
What happened there? How did Sigma lose his eye and both his arms? And why was Radical 6 in there in the first place? What could a deadly virus have to do with the simulated mission to space?
Sorry, but I can't tell you that.
Why?
Because it would change history.
Which was the whole point!
There is a history where the virus didn't escape. That's the line that goes to the right of Point E. In that timeline, humanity isn't heading for annihilation, and Earth isn't red. The future is much brighter. But if I tell you what you're asking me right now, then that reality will disappear. You understand?
I don't. Why would all of that disappear if you told me what I want to know?
You're about to go back to the past, right?
The past? Don't be silly. I can't do that.
And where the hell did you learn all this stuff? I just listened to you tell me a bunch of things you shouldn't have known about. You were sleeping in the pod in the garden. You just woke up. So how can you know all this? You know my past. Sigma's past.
Oh, don't tell me you're about to just end this here, okay? Nobody is about to just stop the conversation.
I shall give you your answer. You are not Kyle Climb.
Oh, there it is.
Your body is Kyle's, but your consciousness is not. Think about it. Do you really believe you are Kyle? Or
No,
could
not
you
from
be
your
someone else entirely?
Then, where is the real Kyle's
Yeah.
consciousness?
He was thrown out
Well,
on you
obviously.
right now, in a manner of speaking. He has arrived at December 25th, 2028.
Curious. So Kyle gets to participate in the... I kind of knew he was in that game as well. I just didn't really know how. So this explains how Kyle's in that, because it's not Kyle. It's whoever this consciousness is, having swapped.
His
Ugh.
consciousness has gone into a body from that time.
Yeah, presumably my body.
I doubt
Whoever
you
I
know
am.
how much the doctor loves Kyle.
I doubt Kyle knows that very much.
He raised him on his own. Kyle is irreplaceable. Do you really think he would go back to the past and leave Kyle behind here?
No, but still, how did he
I
do
know
that?
what I told the others, that Kyle was Dr. Climb's spare, but that was not his only purpose. Kyle's consciousness is integral to what we are trying to accomplish. This new mission begins on Christmas and ends on New Year's Eve, 2028. Its purpose will be to infiltrate the test
Yeah, we
facility
already know it fails.
and prevent the spread of the virus. For this to happen, Kyle is absolutely necessary.
So this, yeah, as I had surmised, this is, or no, actually, in contradiction, I had surmised that all this was unnecessary information. No, this is all absolutely necessary information, setting up the next game. So yeah, Kyle isn't only going to be partaking in that previous one, but it's this consciousness switch that happens after this latest point that somehow causes this to not just always end up in this timeline.
And that is why he created him?
Yes.
And that is also then why Wi-Fi wasn't allowed to tell me, because then that would affect my ability to play the next game.
So now that my consciousness has entered his body, the Doctor has achieved his objective. Kyle has gone back to 2028 to participate in his mission.
Correct.
There's one thing that Kyle was created before reaching Point B from Point D. That means his body did not exist on Christmas in 2028. Does that mean he
Ergo
has
her
entered
bit
my
about...
body? Have we just switched places?
I suppose you could put it that way, yes.
That's ridiculous. What's going to happen to me? You telling me I have to spend the rest of my life here in this box, living in a borrowed body?
No, not at all. You can travel freely through time and space. You are an uncontrolled variable that entered our closed system. As such, the rules of this world do not apply to you.
I have no idea what...
Please don't try to play dumb. I know what you are. Surely you must know by now, too.
Yeah,
You are about to go into the past, and
I
save
think
the
they're trying to
world.
be some sort of meta commentary there about knowing that we're the
Phi
player.
and Sigma, even with all of his future knowledge, will need your help. Only you can right the horrible wrongs of our past.
Is he gonna bring up what everyone
Only
else is
you
thinking
can
about it?
save the world.
But will it save this world?
There's no way I...
Yes, there is. You have to. Don't you want to know the truth? Don't you want to know what happened in between Christmas and New Year's Eve in 2028?
Well, yes, I do, but...
Then you must believe. Reality is shaped by what we believe reality should be. If observation can change the motion of a particle, then how is it odd to think that human thought can shape reality? Your will can change history. The world will be reshaped into the one you imagine.
Are we really just ending there?
Remember what
Well,
I've
not
told
quite,
you.
but-
Only you can change history. Only you can save the world.
And with that... So technically that one, I guess, counts as Akane's end. Well, one of them. Whoop. Alright, well, thanks for watching, and with some different series, and we'll catch you next time.